Welcome everyone to this UXify online event. For those who don't know us, UXify is a meetup group that comes together every pretty regularly, once a month. And our purpose is to stimulate the UX community to indeed come together, share, learn, and connect over various topics, and having always new interesting things to share with each other. And since April, we started a new format, the format that you now see on our events, UX meets ... And for this series of events, for the last 3 months, we addressed the intersection of UX with education, because as we all know, UX can bring so much value to such a large domain, such as education. And today we have the pleasure to have as our guest a team of Studyportals. And we have with us our Berkay, our very own Berkay from UXify, and also Dan and Bart. So I'll give the floor to them to introduce themselves and get started with their presentation.
Awesome. So we have a special slide dedicated for this. So what I will do, I will start sharing my screen. All right. So it's actually, when I was thinking about this evening, I realized that it's a kind of a special evening for me, because it's almost 4 years that I have been organizing events with UXify Eindhoven, and at the same time it's almost 5 years that I have been working at Studyportals, and I'm on the other side of the table, the digital table, for the first time in these 4 years. So what we will be presenting today is the redesign process at Studyportals that we have gone through, and we'll be sharing our learnings in a very open and honest way with you guys. Before that, I would like to just talk a bit about ourselves. And a bit of a funny story about this slide is that when we were preparing the slides, I asked Dan and Bart about their photos, if they could send me a photo to show here. And they sent me these amazingly fun photos with the hats on, which made my professional photo look pretty awkward right next to them. And the question was, can we find a photo with you with in a hat, with a hat on? And I just realized afterwards, I spent like a few minutes and I couldn't find any photos that really has me and a hat on. But I kind of worked on it, and that's the first version of me with the hat on. But then I realized, oh, okay, what's actually much more appropriate for me is the fast hat. Because at Studyportals, actually, my nickname is Sultan, and that's because I'm from Turkey. So a bit of a background, I did my computer science studies in Turkey, and I came to Europe to study design. And after my studies, I started working at Studyportals, and I've been working there for almost 5 years, as I mentioned. In these times, I worked on a bit of everything from research to interaction design, from visual design to design systems, and learned a bit about leadership, marketing, and product design as well. And the main products that I worked on was the search experience, landing pages, and recommendations. So with that, I will pass my turn to Dan to introduce himself.
Oh, hey,
and the fast goes.
Nice. Hi, I'm Dan, as you read already on the slide. I'm originally from Ukraine, and I came to Netherlands around 8 years ago. And before coming here, I was mainly in interaction design and front-end development. But then when I moved to Netherlands, I started doing more user research and started at Studyportals, I think 6.5 years ago, which is a really long time. And also, as Berkay mentioned, I worn also a lot of hats, but basically switched job titles a bit as well. I worked as a UX designer, Scrum Master, product owner, and design lead. And yeah, so far I had a lot of challenges with a lot of fun and nice colleagues. And basically, that's pretty much about me professionally. And I also like climbing, reading, movies, stuff like that. And I would pass it to Bart.
All right. Hi, I'm Bart. I'm from the Netherlands. My background is I have a bachelor's in industrial design and then a master's in strategic innovation. Worked as a UX researcher, UX designer before in the past, and then I switched to product ownership at Studyportals about 2 years ago. Worked in different teams, both on the client side and on the student-facing side, with external teams, remote teams, but also internal, all kinds of different teams, different people. And I really like, especially over the past few months, we've been really collaborating a lot with UX and improving our way of working and our alignment. And after 2 years, I'm still not bored at Studyportals, so look for me to stay for a while.
Awesome. So after giving this introduction to you guys, also want to think a bit about the bigger picture of our company, where we have a super international team, as you maybe can see here from the faces of people. And we're coming from all diverse backgrounds, but there is actually like a common point in all people. Like they're mostly either studied abroad or are interested in studying abroad, and as a result of this, I think it would be an understatement to say we know how to have fun, and that makes the culture of the company quite friendly and quite relaxed, actually. And on top of it, we need to also mention that it's quite a determined and ambitious team. So just to give you a bit of a clear picture about what we do in numbers, in 2019, 36 million students with courses from almost 4,000 educational institutes on 7 of our portals. And these 7 portals are basically bridging the gap between the students and universities. We are trying to promote education all around the world, and we're aiming to make sure that students can study in their dream studies, in their dream countries, and follow the lives that they kind of dream about. So this is the mission of Studyportals. And if we go back to why we started with the Redesign project, well, the reasons for us were that the first or the last redesign was focusing a lot on the functional part of things, how to make the actions and the content appear more visible and clear for the users. And it was focusing a lot on the responsive design. So how can we make sure that our website that is working on desktop can work on mobile as well? And over time, we felt like it was getting a bit outdated. The second reason is scaling up. So with scaling up, you have new colleagues joining, the team growing, and you have like lots of new ideas that all team members are contributing to. But at the same time, you're also seeing your product is going towards ways that you didn't foresee before, and that requires kind of a governance, maybe via design systems, etc., that we didn't have in the beginning. So that also created some visual and interaction inconsistencies around the website. And of course, over the years, brand changed. So the way we interacted with our users, the way marketing team kind of like worked on how we communicate ourselves as an organization changed over years as well, and we felt like our product needed to keep up with that as well. So when we talk about the focus of the project, focusing on the content, because our competitive advantage for our product was the richness of the content. Improving content was a way to go, but we realized that with the amount of content, the more we go into that part, the project would be really big and difficult to tackle at once. So we started from presenting the existing content in a more structured way, and we wanted to inspire the users about studying abroad. So with these goals in mind, we kind of gathered a team of people who would be relevant to contribute to this project. And before the first line, you see basically a combination of Studyportals and a senior visual designer from Hype One, an Eindhoven-based agency, and a freelancer visual designer. And the reason for that was that we didn't have a visual designer on board back then, and we wanted to make sure that that skill set is present in the team, and we are guided with that throughout the beginning of the journey. Our intention was to hire a visual designer, and actually we made that happen. And after that, we continued the project with the in-house visual designer, which was a great experience for us because we always worked with UX designers in the past, and we formed our team based on the UX designers. But working with a visual designer in this project really kind of opened our eyes. And of course, we involved UXT, a product innovation team, and marketing along the way. The process that we followed was actually getting inspired and creating element collages as the examples of how the website could look like, and coming up with the page designs in the end. And I want to dive a bit more into these process steps to explain what we did and what you can do in your own environment. So what were the learning points? When we first started the inspiration part, we wanted to set the tone of our product, and this exercise was quite actually useful for us to make sure that we don't only talk about how can we create a more visual or a cleaner website, because the conversation, even if you're designers, goes that way from time to time. So with this kind of scale, where on one side you have playful and on the other side you have serious, you have easy to use versus advanced, you basically make use of this as a framework to understand in which directions you want your visual design to go. It's basically like a compass with multiple aspects. And on top of it, we basically laid where Mastersportal would be in the scale from classic to modern and from reserved to expressive. And how we position ourselves amongst our competition. And competition not in terms of the features and product, but more as branding and visual design, which helped us to understand, okay, where do we fit and what are the other guys in this sector is doing. And another step we had at the very beginning of the project was taking the goals that we have So how can we inspire the users through web trends? How can we reflect the brand better? And how can we structure our content better? And collecting examples from these areas and basically finding kind of concepts that we could evolve these examples to Studyportals examples. And it was actually a great workshop opportunity for us to involve the whole UX design team, part of the product innovation team, and part of the marketing team. And as a result of these efforts, we basically came up with the design direction that would lead us to the trustworthy and inspiring brand goal that we wanted to achieve through these three main steps. First of all is using motion, then telling a story, and branding it. So these three steps, we wanted to use them as the guidelines along with our design principles to reach us to the final design that we want to go. Then the next step was using this design direction document to come up with the element collages. And we basically came up with the different styles and different elements with reasonings, and we asked for feedback on them in terms of what were the first impression of people, what are the pros and cons of these, and what are the questions that they had in mind from a wider group, a wider audience of UX designers, product innovation people, marketing and engineering teams. And as a result, we could choose one of them that was the most promising. And this process also helped us to understand what worked and what didn't work for all element collages, and also to understand what are the good things that we can use from each element collage and contribute to one direction that we want to move forward with. And while we were summarizing our notes, we also made sure that we note down the reasoning from early on to understand how does the design logic work, how the backgrounds work, how does the text hierarchy and linking and hyperlinks work, to make sure that we are doing things, we are designing things in a systematic way. In the meanwhile, these element collages and the style direction that we were having should converge with the page designs. And for that, we had to understand what's the content we are dealing with. And that started with an Excel sheet to identify content pieces. How can we present the content in a more structured way? And on the page design, how can we tell a story from hero to content cards to detailed information to alternative actions? And how can we basically position these elements on the page so that they can form a page design? And the next step was, of course, marrying the element collage that we chose with the wireframes that we created for the page design. And that was our first shot. So what we do here is we're communicating the brand with the imagery, and we're using the brand colors, and we're basically turning the content cards into maybe more like inspiring elements. But we also saw a lot of problems. It felt a bit boxy, and we weren't really happy with some of the elements. So the next iteration we had, we wanted to improve on these points and make it maybe less boxy, especially on the desktop design, because mostly on the mobile design we were happy with things, but with the involvement of UX team, product innovation team, and engineering team, we wanted to come up with a better solution. And that's actually around the time our visual designer back then joined us. So we also could work together to create the current version, where we believe we present things in a more hierarchical way, and we are using the emphasis on the really important items. And this is probably not the current version because, of course, we're always improving the website. So probably there are more changes that we are testing or experimenting with at the moment. But more or less, this is the recent design idea that we have. And if you put things side by side, the difference is actually quite visible. Where we started with the coffee talks on how we feel we could improve our website, to set up a team, a process, and collaborating with the right people to get to the state where we are at the moment and where we're proud of. In the process, of course, we had moments and things that we appreciated and things that we would probably do differently the next time. And we want to share them with you by connecting them back to the, is this a horror or love story title? So starting with working with an agency, we feel like it's important to work with external people because first of all, you have a different perspective, but on top of it, and it kind of keeps the schedule sharp. So you need to make decisions when you need to, and it doesn't really stretch so much because in 2 weeks you have another moment with the agency where you will need to prepare and do your homework and decisions from your side. So that went positive. We kind of spotted an opportunity to get ideas from designers from all around the world. That was especially relevant at the beginning phases where we had the inspiration and when we were creating the style tiles. We included one freelance designer, so it's not on the very extreme horror side, but we feel like we could have done much more because there is a huge global design community that are ready to help with mostly quite affordable costs in a sense. So maybe that's something to try out for the next time. One of big learnings for us is that do not underestimate the power of visual design and power of visual designer, because the work that you create between a UX designer and visual designer is quite impressive actually, and also what looks good works good as well, and that helps not only in front of user eyes but also for the internal buy-in. It's not that everything sticks, so the design directions and the documents like these things that would help you to design better, just treat them as prototype artifacts and don't try to make full-stretched designed documents from it. Our fault was maybe spending a bit too much on those and seeing them less as intermediary documents. So this is a learning for us for the next time. And one last learning that we had was designing with a small but progressing with a larger group really helps because with the small group you can discuss things in more detail. You can dive deep into design and make sure that people who take the lead in visual design can really contribute to it. Without designing with democracy, but at the same time, progressing with a larger group is so important because you need to involve a bigger audience in the design team and also within the company, and there are lots of opportunities to do that. So this was the visual design part, and we had strategy, content, and research tracks as well. For this presentation, we will be focusing on the research part with them, and after that part we'll present more on how we make this project a reality on the real website. So this is the end of my section, and I'll be stopping to share my screen.
I shared mine. I hope you didn't notice the difference.
Do we have a minute?
Very smooth.
All good.
There is a question from the audience. In the meantime, if So
Yeah, let's do questions indeed. Yeah.
yes, so Amir K is asking, can you elaborate a bit on the 3 things you mentioned regarding creating a brand identity? What do you mean by creating motion?
Yeah. So actually, what we saw in the trends that we liked on the web was that we were seeing people using more and more motion. And one of the concepts that we had from the workshops was that our audience is not gray. We are serving for a community, a group of users who are quite young, and they want to make their next step in their education journey. And this is a very exciting and inspiring step, actually, to study abroad and to go to another country to make their dreams come true. And we felt that with the use of motion and making the website look more lively, we could help their decision, and we could excite and inspire this target audience better than our old version of the website, where we thought it was a bit more on the gray side and a bit more on the static side.
Thank you.
Is there any other?
I was going to ask if there's there's no other question coming from the community. So please, Dan, go ahead with your presentation.
Sure. So as Berkay mentioned, we had to pick our battles and focus on some topics, not the full scope. So basically this part is mainly about research. And as you probably know, all good research starts with 1 or 2 questions or maybe more. And we had to ask ourselves quite a few questions, because we had to work on a visual redesign project while we, let's say, were 100% comfortable working on visual design part. We wanted to, but as Berkay mentioned, background-wise, there were some challenges. And we also, because we are coming from UX background, we had this question: how do we actually measure success of design during and after rollout, and how do we measure success of visual design, which is maybe a bit more subjective. And of course, the main question for us was quite a simple one: is the prototype more successful than the current website? And of course, we needed to agree on a few categories of success. So in our case, we wanted to look at visual appeal and inspiration. So Berkay explained quite a bit already our thought process there. We also wanted to look into hierarchy issues on the page, so in terms of headings, in terms of colors as well, and also text heaviness and scannability. So I will mostly focus on visual design testing, because this is, again, quite a broad subject, and we'll have to skip some parts. Sorry about that. So yeah, maybe you are wondering, did you guys start with visual design right away? Did you do research up front, or how did it work? Well, by that time, we already had user journey, we had personas, we had quite some outcomes of different questionnaires, usability tests were part of our culture. So that was, we were not starting from scratch, so to say. And actually, this project slowly evolved from the feedback we received. So feedback from prior user research, feedback from UX experts, and also our colleagues. And we tried to map it all together and put it in one physical space, which, well, currently is a bit more complicated, but then again, you can use a lot of tools like Freehand or Figma to visualize this kind of things as well. And next step was for us picking research methods, and there we tried to answer a few questions. What do we measure? Is there some validated method to do that? Because inventing the bicycle is not, I mean, it's exciting, but it's not always working that well. And when and how can we actually get this user feedback in terms of the project timeline, and how do we approach users? Who do we talk to? All these things. So when when we kind of visualized the project we had, we tried to define certain phases, and that was plan, define, create, and evaluate. And in plan and define phase, we mainly focused on strategy, outline, and also how do we approach this project, a lot of alignment, buy-in internally, all these kind of things. Today, I would like to talk about last two stages, which is create and evaluate. Actually, that's where most of the user research, new user research was happening. And we started with trying to establish baseline. So we wanted to understand what do we want to measure in the beginning, somewhere in the middle, and at the end of the project, and how do we see if we succeeded or not. Then we also wanted to do first impression testing, because when we looked into visual design research, well, first impression is quite a big part for example, branding testing, and also in general emulates nicely experience of the user landing on your page from Google search engine or something like this. And basically, there are some methods to do that. For example, 20-second test, and also preference testing. Visual appeal, we wanted also to go a bit more fundamental and dive a bit deeper, basically, into this subject. So we found a certain methodology, which I'm going to explain in a bit. Also, we wanted, of course, to test findability to understand if users can actually still find things they were able to find in the old design. And of course, also goal completion and proper A/B testing, where we could also test conversion, business goals, user goals, everything together. So I think Bart will be talking more about that in the end. So when we start with baseline, we looked around and found a methodology called SuperQ, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's called Standardized User Experience Percentile Rank Questionnaire. And it's quite a short questionnaire, which you can embed on your website or do it as a survey and so on. It's very well described by Jeff Saura, who invented it. He's having his own company called Measuring You. But what does it contain? So it contains questions relating to usability. You can see one of the examples below. Trust, the information on the website is trustworthy, for example, and then user needs to rate it from 1 to 5. Loyalty, a part of loyalty is also famous and infamous at the same time. Net Promoter Score question. It's interesting, but yeah, you probably heard a lot of things about it as well. And appearance, of course. So for us, trust and appearance were the most interesting parts to actually measure. And that was methodology which contained both of them. Because we are dealing with application process also for the students, and for a big decision of studying abroad, of course, we want to be trustworthy, and hopefully appearance also helps with it, and all those things are connected. What we added from ourselves is a follow-up question, which was based on NPS score. So we also asked people what was the most important reason for their score for qualitative feedback, actually. And that might be, yeah, actually for us, it was very useful part of the survey. How does it look for participant? Well, he or she visits the website and they can see a small intercept questionnaire. Of course, there are different ways to implement it. We could have sent an email, we could have do it in person, but we felt intercept questionnaire is closer to experience, so it's probably soliciting more authentic feedback. What do we get as a result? So currently with our visitors numbers, we of course didn't ask everyone to rate us. We actually targeted users very, very precisely. We only talk to engaged users and only a very small fraction of them, because again, we don't want to spam people with questions. But we managed to get 300, 600 responses per month for last year. And how does it look like? Well, we built a lot of dashboards around it, but basically you can see evolution of each score every month. This is very zoomed in version, and yeah, you don't have any scale to see it, because I think it would be a bit distracting for this presentation. But what we've noticed that this baseline measurement was fairly stable for us. So There were no big fluctuations, and here I needed really to zoom in to see them. So what actually you can do with it? So if you set it up via Hotjar, like we did, you can also segment different pieces of feedback and, well, basically scores by devices, countries of users, and also pages of your website. So countries are very interesting for us because we have users from all over the world. And for example, if a student is willing to study in European Union, but they are not from European Union, well, they need a visa. So those users are actually a bit having different needs from users who are moving from one European country to another. And in this case, it's really nice to spot, oh, is there a problem there, and so on. And currently, we're still running it and probably keep doing it because this survey helps us to detect like also issues and bugs with the current website. Qualitative results, so that's not really part of this methodology, but very similar to any qualitative surveys. So what we usually do, we label responses, of course, paying attention more to negative and constructive feedback. And of course, you need to check your biases. It's a challenge. You should strive to avoid being biased, but of course, it's impossible to completely avoid that. And what we usually do, so we label those different categories of feedback. And you can see here, I took two labels, UI and content presentation labels, and mapped them on timescale. And we could see quite a big difference when we released the new website. Not everyone loved it. There was overwhelming positive response, but of course also we had some old users who were wondering, oh, why did you guys do this instead of that? And we also were able to pick up some of that feedback. Then next method, well, I'll let you see it for yourself. So describe the look and feel of this website in 3 words. So that's a first impression test. Quite simple. We used Usability Hub for that, pretty nice tool. And what we did, we basically asked people to tell us 3 words what they feel about the website. What we did, we split this, we got like 150 words from 50 students. We split this words document among designers, and 3 designers evaluated it independently without knowing which variation they're evaluating, because it was kind of a mix of things. Then we averaged word scores for 3 evaluators and calculated total scores per variations, and also later on did analysis on words themselves and tried to cluster them. So here we kind of needed to invent our own bicycle a little bit. So we used the totally invented scale, which was based on our project goals. So if something was matching our goals, we rated it positive or matching goals. If something was against goals, we rated it negatively. All in all, it was very important to share results in a simple way. So we just had a 2-page report where we had a summary, which was fairly conclusive for well, benefit of variation. And you can see here as well, we had some clusters of people's words, positive and negative. So then visual appeal. So that was a moment when we decided to dive a bit deeper into deconstruct visual design a bit more. So for that, we picked Visavi, which is a visual aesthetics of website inventory tool. It was invented by 2 researchers from Germany, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll provide links in the end. And basically, they tried to make subjective evaluation of visual design more objective. It's a 18-point questionnaire, and you can see here, for example, one part of it is simplicity. So it's 5 Likert scale like questions on simplicity. You have diversity questions. You have colorfulness questions, and you have craftsmanship questions. How does it look like? Well, actually, before that, we also needed, of course, to recruit users because it's more of a small sample method. So we decided to start a web like ad on social media. You probably can guess which one. And we also selected according to our personas. So we created a screener in Survey Gizmo where we asked a few questions from people to understand if they're fitting persona we are trying to match right now. And we ran 2 surveys in parallel. So for half of the participants, we sent old design first and asked them to evaluate it, and then new design, and other way around to prevent order bias. How does it look like? Well, that's just 1 page out of 3, but yeah, it's fairly simple and it doesn't take too much time for participant, which is quite important. And people can score differently phrased sentences. Some of them are negative, some of them are positive, and later on the scores are reversed. So you can see here, this is like one of the examples of results page, and you can see one variation compared to another, and when it's marked R, this is a question in reverse, so you can compare these 2 numbers easier. And then you also kind of have an overall picture, how do you do in general and on each of these parameters together. In our case, it was quite clear like difference between these 2 variations. So what did we learn from all that? Well, validated methods did save us quite some time and sanity when we had to come up with our own methodologies. Well, you never know if it's going to work. You never know, how it's going to go. Of course, you still should plan more time for user recruitment. So that's something which we faced quite a few times in the past as well. In the end, the more picky you are about your users, the more time you need to budget for that. And with Visavi, we had slight issues with their platform. So it's also possible to mirror this survey to your own like survey software, and then later on credit, put a source where you took the methodology from, and you can actually do it yourself as well. It's not difficult to count results. And of course, my favorite, always write down your learning points throughout the process. We did some retrospectives and we always kept notes, but I felt while compiling this presentation, I could have also had more learning points. But of course, that's not the end. This is a bit of an off topic, so I'll move quite fast. So on findability part, we did usability test. So it's quite straightforward. So I guess you know what it is all about. But what we did, we defined top tasks. We did comparative usability tests. So we showed for one audience old website, for another audience a new website. That, of course, implied that our sample size needed to be bigger. And we also needed to make our live website more comparable to prototype. So we needed to clean up a few things, make it a bit more, put it in InVision as screenshots, things like that. And of course, one of the most important things is how do you share it? So what we do with usability tests, we always have a very quick summary and a lot of detailed notes for everyone who is interested in, because at least most people will read a quick summary. And yeah, if your research reports or your findings are not read, then why are you doing your user research? So we are trying to keep it concise. What else? Well, there was quite a lot of stuff. We did heat maps with Hotjars, click streams, behavioral data tracking. We have a lot of dashboards, not going to show it now. And also even card sorting for content of our pages. You can see it here with heat maps. But of course, we ended with A/B test. So A/B test in this case was a balancing act for us of effort to build it before the release and speed to get the results. So we tried to skip some edge cases. So initially we started with a fraction of all the pages we have. Then we switched to mobile only test. Then we tried to release it in stages. So 5, 10, 50% of visitors were exposed to it. And I think this is actually a connection for the Bart part. And I think, Bart, you can unmute yourself and jump right in.
I think you have a Q&A, right?
Thank you, Dan. I think we can move on to the next presentation, and perhaps more questions will come up for the Q&A.
Awesome.
For Bart to give him the floor.
I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So after a long process of designing and testing, we're finally ready to launch. So remember, the original goal was to improve the UX, the text heaviness, the content hierarchy, and the visual appeal, and to do so without negative business impact. What we learned in the process, we created actually a design that created also some major KPI improvements. So we were really excited to release. So basically at this point it was just flipping a switch, a little more to it than that, but the work was done. We did testing, we knew we were good, but generally speaking it's not a trivial undertaking, such a big switch. So you want to monitor it and be on top of it. So we'd set up a Slack channel with all the people involved to share the results and to keep close communication lines. And it's a good thing we did, because when we launched, the results actually came in and they were significantly different from the test. So this is why you have to be on top of things. No matter how confident you are about your design, you cannot always expect things to go smoothly. You have to prepare for failure, or at least for issues, and have contingency plans. So that also includes setting probably tolerance for failure. How much are you willing to suffer? What can you or how long are you willing to suffer? What impact can you sustain? And when do you pull the plug? It's always good to think about these scenarios. In our case, we did careful testing and still fell into this trap. So it's normal to face different kinds of adversity, but it's all about how you deal with this adversity that determines the success of your story. So today I'll explain how we overcame our challenges and also in the process grew as a company. So we started our investigation. And the first question is, can we trust this data that we're looking at? Are the results that are coming in, are they accurate? Or maybe with the switch, are we not properly tracking everything anymore? Where is the issue? Well, it turned out the data was correct, unfortunately. So then you look at the experiment data. Can we trust that? And it turns out that that's where we had an issue with the tracking. And so big problem, because then we didn't know what to expect, of course. In hindsight, maybe we were a bit too optimistic. The experiments did show very positive results, like some of the metrics almost doubled. And maybe we should have been a bit more critical. It was almost too good to be true, and that's looks too good to be true. It probably is. So that's the second cautionary tale, is to always stay critical on the numbers. Like these major design overhauls, more often than not, they yield disappointing results. And the baseline, in our case as well, often turns out better than you expect. And we've heard this from other companies as well, big companies. And it makes sense, because you've been perfecting it years over years. So it's hard to just all at once create a variation that competes with that. And because you're invested in design and you go through this process, you think it's so much better than the old one. It's very easy to start believing in these numbers and in your own hype. But it's good to always be careful and to stay critical on the data. So we had to set a plan B. So we launched on Monday, and so we monitored throughout the week. And then on Friday morning, we had a crisis meeting. Our first thing was, okay, let's just revert. The experiment data is not accurate. We don't know. We're not ready. It's better to just revert the changes, go back to the drawing board, fix the issues, and then go live again. Unfortunately, this play we couldn't do. You see, when you have these structural changes to pages, Google has to index them, re-index them. It's different with style changes, but because they had to re-index them, and then if we reverted back to the old pages, they had to re-index them again. So you don't want, then Google gives you these penalties. And of course, if we were ready in a couple of weeks or months after fixing the issues to release again, we would get triple punishment. That's just not what you want. That would have such an impact on traffic. We couldn't bear that. So that's also why it's important to always have an SEO expert with redesigns like this. They can guide you through this process and help you understand the impact of these changes. So then I was over to plan C. So this was our mindset. Couldn't go back. So let's look forward. Let's look at how we can fix this. I mean, it's an MVP, so it's not perfect yet. We did some concessions in order to get it out. We still had ideas left on the shelf that we didn't get to. It's basically a lot of untapped potential and still some improvements that you can make. So what we said is, okay, 1 week to fix things, 1 week to bring the metrics back to where they were, and basically mitigate the negative impact that the redesign had, that the launch had. And let's take today, that Friday, to come up with a list of things that we can do, ideas that will have an impact. And then at the end of the day, let's get together, look at the list of what's feasible in a week and see if we think we can create the impact we need. So that was the plan. So we got together, got a group of POs, designers, engineers together, explained the situation, of course, difficult circumstances, but everybody embraced the challenge. So we dropped everything and spent that day coming up with a plan. So we started by creating a freehand in Envision, just a big canvas, and we started individually dropping ideas. There are individual idea generation. And that's where it's super crucial to have a multidisciplinary team. So we had all kinds of people and everybody comes at it from different angles. So we had fresh people that hadn't really worked with the design or seen it that much. So they could just browse it and see and spark ideas that way. We had people just looking at the data and seeing where the biggest drops were to see where the major areas of improvement were. We had some assumptions that we checked with Google Analytics. We looked at the behavior and to see how people are interacting with the new design. And that way we came up with a whole variety of different types of ideas, smaller and bigger, that we could use to improve the design. And then from there, we discussed these ideas, we refined them, we scoped them, make sure that we stuck to the essence of them, and that we're all on the same page about what we need to do. We didn't have time for scope creep. And we also did a pre-selection because we really couldn't afford any negative impact at this point. So all the risky ideas, the things that can go either way, we avoided those, discarded them. And so we were left with a list of ideas that we thought could have a good positive impact on the metrics. So we clustered them and then we prioritized them. So we looked at the impact that they would have, that we expect them to have, and about the effort that it would take to realize these features. And then based on that prioritization, we eventually came up with a final list that we then copied to a spreadsheet. And at the end of the day, we discussed it with all the relevant people and we got to go ahead. So that was a really exciting day. In that day, we came up with the whole plan for the week. But I want to circle back to the prioritization and give you a bit of an idea how we did that. There is a framework called ICE. Stands for Impact, Confidence, and Ease of Implementation. And it's really tailor-made for these type of situation where you want to impact a very specific topic. It doesn't really work for like long-term strategies or choosing between big epics, because then you have a lot more factors at play. But for this type of challenge, it works really well. So basically you take all your ideas and you put them there on the left. And then the first step, the first question is the impact. So how big is the impact if this idea works? So you look at the KPI that you want to influence. And let's say the impact you expect is 10%, then you score it a 5. It's pretty straightforward. Then the second question is the confidence. So how likely is it that this feature will work and that it will bring that desired impact? Of course, you have a lot of data points that you can go on. We use a confidence wheel for that. So on the right are more like the anecdotal evidence stuff, opinions, things you want to avoid. And this wheel is heavily favored towards the more data-driven stuff like user research, experiments, or live data. And then so based on what data points you have to go on, that determines your confidence level. And then the third column is the ease of implementation. So how much resources do you need to spend to get it live? You can do this like here in person weeks, you can do person days. I think for this challenge we actually did person hours, but you can also look at team weeks if it's about bigger things. So you just estimate the time it will take. So you need to have the scope really clear, and then you just assign it a score. And at the end you multiply them, and that gives you your ICE score. And by sorting on that, that gives you a good indication of how you can create the most amount of impact with the least amount of effort. Of course, it's just a guideline. You don't have to take it all the way from the top, but it's a good input to make your decisions. So then we had that week where we implemented all the changes. So we delivered about 4 or 5 features each day. We released every day, and every day we monitored the impact, communicated to everybody, and stayed on top of it. What was really amazing to see was the agility and flexibility shown by everybody. Everybody really came together on this one. And it made for some fantastic collaboration between the engineers, between designers, POs, data, everybody. And it was an amazing experience. So in the end, we also turned the ship around. So we hit the marks that we needed to hit. We got back to our baseline and even a little bit higher. So basically, we saved the implementation of the redesign, which was a victory. And this whole process, it was very successful, both in the results as well as in the collaboration and the way of working. So since then, we've actually reused it several times. About once a month, we try to pick a topic and have this same process that we go through, brainstorm, and then select ideas, and then have a sprint focused on a specific topic to create impact there. And it works really well. That was just the beginning. So we started with our core page, one of our core pages, the study page, and the launch is just a start. So we're 6 months in and we're still working on this. So you launch it, it doesn't have everything. So you're going to get questions from clients, from commercial colleagues. And what's important here is that it's a clean slate, right? So you don't want to copy everything one-to-one from the old design, because then you end up in the same situation where you were. Kind of defeats the purpose. So at for every issue, everything that you're missing, you want to rethink it, rethink the way it fits in the design, or even rethink the way you do business or the way you operate. Do you really need it? Can we do it in a different way? Because ultimately, that's how you're going to maintain your optimal UX. So the next step after the core pages is to roll it out to our pages and then the periphery of the website. We're starting with styling because that's pretty straightforward and it gets you that consistent look and feel, so it doesn't conflict as much. And then page by page, we will decide if we need a more structural redesign as well. Because of course, if you implement a structural redesign again, you get SEO impact. So we have to evaluate on a page by page basis if this is what you need or if a styling is sufficient. It's also a great opportunity to launch a design system if you don't have one yet. It forces you to document all your design decisions and design guidelines. And it's also really important to involve front-enders because they can set up reusable components that are a one-to-one match of your UI kit. And it just makes it really easy to roll out changes. It helps with the consistency across the website, the efficiency of implementing changes, and the ease of maintenance. But this, so you're releasing this design, but you gain new insights as it's live, right? So you want to be flexible. It's going to be subject to change. So having a design system and reusable components will really help you roll out changes faster and make you much more flexible. So then a couple of takeaways, bit of a summary. Always important to be prepared for issues. So don't expect things to go smoothly, and have a team ready that can respond to issues and to mitigate any negative impact that your design might have. I think that's very important. Also crucial, involving an SEO person. Google can be a bit secretive about their algorithms and their practices, and it really helps to have someone that can help you navigate these waters, and can make sure that you can maintain or improve your position in the search ranking and not have too much of an effect on your traffic. Also, very important to have a multidisciplinary team, involve all kinds of people, not necessarily always at the same time. So think about when to involve which people, and don't forget the business. So don't just stick with your IT colleagues. Business has a completely new perspective, and it's actually these different kind of viewpoints that ultimately lead to the best solutions and the best product. So that's also very crucial. And finally, I would say simple frameworks like the one I showed, the ICE framework, just to get, for instance, to the most impactful set of ideas. It takes away your bias, and it helps you kill your babies. And ultimately, again, get to the best product and the best solutions to create the most impact. That was the end of my part. So in conclusion, was it a horror love story? I would say it's both. Like any good movie, it doesn't fit into one genre. Sometimes it was a psychological thriller. Other times it was a drama or even a comedy. There were ups and downs. So at least this process was very good to do. It takes away the subjectivity and it helps to create buy-in with yourself, with stakeholders. And in the end, for us, it turned out to be a moonshot that really elevated every practice in our business, from design to SEO to technical implementation, as well as the alignment and collaboration between all these different disciplines. So it really, in the process, helped us grow as a team and as a company. And on that note, we'd also like to thank everybody that collaborated on the design. They're listed in the bottom. Some of them are, I guess, watching this on YouTube. We truly appreciate all the help from everybody. That brings us to the end of the story. So I also truly appreciate the attention you had for our story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Berkay, Bart, and Dan, for your presentation. Now let's open the Q&A session, perhaps with a question that we received from our channels earlier, which I believe was a question for Dan. So the question was, on the coffee slide, I noticed indeed a big visual difference, and in my opinion, a very nice one. And you mentioned you are happy with the results so far. How does the user appreciate the new design? Any user feedback on that?
Yeah, actually, well, thanks for the question. Actually, we do receive a lot of feedback about visual style of the website, and we've seen quite a big change after release happened, actually. Even initial release, we've seen a lot more qualitative feedback in SuperQ, as I mentioned before. And some users who already used platform for a while also noticed the change, and some phrases were like, very fresh, crisp, bright, and positive look. Literally reading from one of the things we received. But then again, of course, also there were people who pointed out a few questions, which we tried to follow up. But again, we had way more positive comments than before about content presentation, about colors, about structure of the page. So all those things.
All right. Thank you so much. We received another question in the chat from AL. Bart, you mentioned the redesign raised questions about how Studyportals does business. What sort of impact did it have on the business side of things?
Did I say it raised questions? No, I was just constantly rethinking the way we operate. So you have a certain structure, a certain way you do things. Things get ingrained in the way of working over time. And it's just important that to not just take that over and to not just look at how you visually put stuff on the website, but there's also things we can maybe rethink in how we interact with clients or how we, like an example we're working on currently is how we, the structure of organizations that we implement, and how we do that in the back end. And for instance, so we always have to balance between clients and students have a certain perspective and they want to see certain information, and clients, as well as agencies, faculties, pathway providers, they want to show their stuff maybe in a different way. So you always have to balance these perspectives and always have to rethink if it's optimally what we're doing and if we're not leaning too much to one side or the other. If that answers the question.
All right, thank you. I think we have a little follow-up question still from the community on the previous question. How did you manage the changes on the English test providers? I saw they're at the bottom now.
Yeah, that's an inside question, I think. Right now we deprioritized it a little bit, but I think I heard they probably, there will be some changes there as well. Cannot say much yet about it. It's a bit of a secret. But exciting, good user-focused stuff hopefully coming. So.
Cool. We have another question. So from Yang, curious how far you guys are now with extending the redesign to other pages. Maybe
I think Bart,
you guys choose.
take that one.
Yeah, sure. Hi Yang, hi El, by the way. So we're still working on the core page, the initial page, and still improving that and still integrating new content into it. Meanwhile, we're also running experiments, optimizing the style. We do have a plan, and now in Q3 we're going to actually roll it out, or that's the plan, to roll it out to other pages, starting with the styling. So we're going to practice what I just preached, create a styling package for the base styling. So that's what we're testing at the moment. And once we create that, it's very easy for us to roll it out to all the other pages, first on Mastersportal. And meanwhile, we've also did a test implementation of the new design on Mastersportal, but so we have different portals with different content, different constraints. So for instance, we have features on Mastersportal that we don't have on Mastersportal. So we need to see what are the changes that we need to do, that we need to make, because it's not a one-to-one transfer. But so it's looking good. We're gearing up for rolling it out in Q3.
And from design side, maybe on a page-specific level, I think the ones in the pipeline are the part of the core experience again, the search page, and the idea with having search pages as landing pages, the profile page as part of the probably tackled soon. So we have like plans about many pages, but we want to start with the pages that help the most currently with the core experience. So these are the two high candidates, let's say.
Yeah, we have a list of all the pages pretty much, which in order, so to say. But of course, there are other things as well. We all have noticed that there is also coronavirus out there, so we had to also do some things to help out students and clients on that side. So things shifting, but I think now we have quite a clear timeline as well. But again, it's agile.
Awesome. Well, before we close, I just, well, first of all, thank you, all of you, for sharing with us your experience with your redesign. And yeah, I think it's been a very interesting talk to hear really like the inside out of this whole process and what you learn, all the facets of it. So thank you so much for enlightening us with your insights. To our communities that is following us on YouTube, in a second, Sarah will share with you our UXify survey. So if you could take literally a minute to filling up the survey, it would be really awesome, so that we can always improve our events. You will find it in the live chat in a second.
And I guess for the people who will be listening or watching this video, they can also find it in the description, I hope.
Exactly, and then we'll also repost it in the comment. Sorry, in the description, indeed. Down below, as they say. Fantastic. Well, I think we have come to an end of our event. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up soon. And good luck with the next steps.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having us, and thanks a lot for joining. I've seen a lot of WhatsApp messages coming by. It was really heartwarming from people who joined as well.
Fantastic. All right.
Thanks
Lovely.
for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks to you. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.